2015, all of us thought, oh, like deep learning is here. Very soon you're going to have like everything that's reported by radiologists. Jeffrey Hinton very famously said, right, we should stop training radiologists. Never panned out the way it is because radiology is so complex and the human anatomy. Solve a chest x-ray by downloading a dataset from Kaggle and then working on it and thinking that is your startup. Go out and sit in radiology labs and see what kinds of and just talk to the patient, see why they're in. Making money in India for a health tech product is incredibly difficult, right? I mean, it boils down to what is the value you're delivering to the hospital. And if the answer is efficiency for the radiologist, like one common conversation that I've had to face with is, okay, so you're helping radiologists have longer tea breaks. I mean, these are salaried employees, you're making their life easier. What value is it to the healthcare is trust. I mean, it's trust. And finally, you if you have a fever, you're down at home with a cough, you probably know that if you just wait it out and have some paracetamol, you're going to be fine in a few days. But by the third day, you still want to go see a doctor, and the doctor is basically just writing Dolo and sending you home. But just because you wanted someone to say you'll be fine, you go see the doctor, you pay $1,000. Right? I think that is healthcare. And so
hi everyone, in this episode I get a chance to speak with Suthirth Vaidya. Suthirth is the Director of Product Management at Inference and Director of Product at Anumana. This episode is mostly a discussion on the applications of AI in healthcare. We do this in three distinct phases. One is pre-2012, which is pre-deep learning, post-2012, which is AI 1.0, and post-2022, which is AI 2.0. We discuss the unique use cases and applications which each of these phases make possible. Along with the deck, we also discuss what does it take to actually build a healthcare company in India. What are the challenges and what are hospitals / customers actually willing to pay for. If you're building something in healthcare or if you're just curious about the landscape in AI in healthcare, this episode should be a good starting point for you. Finally, I just want to say that this episode has been an extremely special episode for me to record. Even though I've done more than 250 episodes, this episode really stands out for me. Mostly because Suthirth, along with Kiran, Abhijit and Digvijay, were the people who gave me a chance to intern at Credible Health and essentially kickstarted my deep learning career. For that, I'm forever grateful, and it was an absolute honor for me to record this episode with Suthirth. With that, my friends, Suthirth Vaidya.
Right now in 2025, there is a lot of buzz in terms of generative AI and the impact that it's having on multiple industries. But if we can put a pin on that and maybe explore, if we can go back to, let's say, 2015, if I can make that as a cutoff date, what were the applications of AI pre-deep learning? Like, what was being done? If you can maybe shed some light there, we can maybe pick it up from there.
Yeah. See, I think I'm talking biased from a lot of it from radiology because that's the space I understand best. So if I look at pre-2015, 2010s, what worked in the world of radiology, you had all these software solutions called computer-aided detection. What was computer-aided detection? Computer-aided detection were these computer vision algorithms that could help detect, things like cancerous lesions or other findings that are critical or should not be missed, right? And the most common of these are mammograms. So you had like lesions on mammograms that were very often missed, and you had these computer-aided detection softwares. And the way basically people went about writing these algorithms basically required like a software developer or a data scientist, you'd call them today, a software developer to really understand the images like a radiologist would. Basically like become a radiologist themselves, and basically how these people, so you basically had these software developers or data scientists today that would basically put themselves in the shoes of a radiologist, and they'd really understand how radiologists detect these lesions. And basically then they'd have to go about writing rules. So then they'd say, so the equivalent is you're writing an algorithm to detect a cat. You have to say, look for eyes, look for whiskers, look for, that mouth, fur, and all of that.
But are we talking about this in this 3D space or?
No, most mammograms are all 2D. So all of these are, most of the there are actually computer detection algorithms that even came out for lung nodules in chest CTs. But most of what we're talking about is like, mammograms is like, 2D images. You're looking at some lesion. So you're looking some area that looks brighter than what is surrounding. So you write bunch of rules for it. and there's always subjectivity in how you define those rules and how would you do it. So it took a lot of time.
And I'm guessing if I can compare that to, let's say, traditional computer vision as well, I'm guessing the results were abysmal or not very good. Or
Yeah, I'd say results were not great. There are a lot of false positives. Even today, if you look back at those systems and those numbers, the specificity isn't great, the sensitivity is also not great. So it's not necessarily picking up everything too, but it's also throwing a lot of false positives and false alarms. So it's not great, right? So those algorithms existed, right, in pre 2012 or pre deep learning era, and you also had like ECG systems, for instance. Now that I understand that world also a little bit, like you still, and even today, machines, ECG machines, they built in come with some algorithms that tell you on the ECG like some basic findings. Those algorithms have always existed, and they're also built very much the same way, right? So someone's written very custom hard coded rules, and so minute these studies start getting more complex or complicated, like the systems will just be quite messy, right? So but they exist, and they're some of these ECG algorithms, for instance, are still in use even today.
what would you say happened around like 2012, 2015? Like, how did the landscape change? Where did it affect, let's say, most? And what kind of use cases kind of like opened up which were probably not possible before?
I think biggest paradigm shift was, I mean now in hindsight, that was not so much a paradigm shift as the next 2.0 AI wave, right? AI wave 1.0 was basically deep learning. And what is deep learning is fundamentally you could throw a lot of data. So instead of someone having to write rules to say, whiskers, cat ears, etc., you could just say, here are a million cat images, here are a million non-cat images, go figure out what a cat looks like, right? And that basically just now enabled software developers or data scientists to not have to put themselves into the shoes of a radiologist, but instead just have access to a lot of data. And now the new challenge is, how do you get good quality data, high quality data, and lots of it. That does open up a lot of avenues, because one, now building algorithms that did things similar to what you could do earlier has become much easier and much more efficient. So if you had millions of images, and you have say radiology reports for all those million images, you could basically try to condense your radiology report into a bunch of 20, 30, 50, 40, how many ever findings, and you say convert them to yes or no labels, and then you can train a model that can detect 30 to 40 findings from a given image. And that's what many companies have gone on to do in chest x-rays and head CTs and many images. So that's really what it opened up, right? Earlier, if you had to build in the pre-deep learning era, if someone had to build a machine learning model that could detect like 40 findings, you are looking at 40 cross 4 or 3 data scientists. You need an army of 100 people, or sequentially it will take forever to actually build something like that. But now we are at a stage where you could say, if I have enough labeled data, I could train one large model, or I could train, it's easier, it's more efficient, it's easier, and someone doesn't have to do all the thinking. You just have to throw data at the problem.
Is it fair to say that at least post 2015, the largest set of companies that were started mostly started in the computer vision space rather than, let's say, NLP space? Is that fair assessment, or do you think there was also, at least when you mentioned, right, like head CT, mammograms, or veins from liver, stuff like that, mostly look like computer vision use cases? Do you think like when deep learning hit, when the CNN wave hit, was it mostly, and even the companies that took advantage, do you think mostly were computer vision based?
Yeah, I think so. I think deep learning gave significant improvement in performance in computer vision initially, much more than text data. The text moment really for AI happened later, right, with transformers.
I think 2018
BERT was sort of the first big one, and then BERT evolved, and then we fast forward today, you have GPT, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I feel even though BERT came out in 2018, I mean, I feel till 2022, till ChatGPT released, the action was not like that crazy, right? Like even though the tech was there for like so long.
Yeah. I mean, people were using BERT, a lot of BERT, to structure data, or like identify symptoms, identify symptoms or like different kinds of entities from text, and lots of cool tasks, but nothing that was really dramatic, right? Or nearly as significant as the kinds of things you could do in computer vision that were like valuable in a healthcare setting, at least, right?
Also, if I may jump in there, in the sense that I would assume, like let's say after 10 years, right, like 2015 to now we are in 2025, I don't know if it's naive to assume this, but I would assume that computer vision should be solved, right? Or like let's say anything to do with X-rays or anything to do with radiology per se would be solved. But I still feel there's still a lot of
I mean, and I think that is because, and I think I think a lot of the world, right? I mean, I still go back to when I was talking to a physician who I had met very early on in the days of Credible, right? And spoken to him and talking to him about just thinking back of what we were all thinking in 2015, right? And in 2015, all of us thought, oh, like deep learning is here. Very soon, you're going to have like everything that's reported by radiologists. Jeffrey Hinton very famously said, right? We should stop training radiologists. Never panned out the way it is, because radiology is so complex and the human anatomy is so complex, and we assume that the only thing you'll ever want to do from an image by looking at it is list about 20 or 30 findings or 40 findings, but it's never the case, right? There are images that are taken for so many wide variety of use cases where what you're looking for is, like, imagine like a CT that is taken for regular screening versus a CT that you're taking for pre-surgical planning. Like, have completely different things that you're looking for, different things that you'd want to see, different kinds of ways in you'd want that report to be written, or maybe it needs to be visualized in some way. So I think there's just like that context, right, is missing, right? Because you're trying to feed it as if for any given image these are the only things, these are the only kind of things that I need to look at, and there are only so many ways in which you describe it, right? But what happens in most of these cases, you have a patient who has 17 other conditions and also has some devices in their body, and you want to plan a surgery for them. Like, the report you write for that, or what you need to look for, is like not standard. Like, you need a lot of contextual thinking to I mean, and your AI algorithms can tell you there's something here can't even come close to trying to describe what it is.
But to push back, I mean, in 10 years, I would assume that at least at least some company would have had access to so much data that they would have cracked this, right? That is one part of the puzzle. Second, if I may get a prediction from your side, if where you are today, when do you think we will actually get to see Jeff Hinton's prediction come true? Like, do you see in the next 5 years, at least, do you think at least the job that radiologists are doing today, will they still be doing that? Or do you think they're going to see a dramatic shift in terms of like what the job is for a traditional radiologist?
I think it's no, I agree. I do think we are getting closer to you're getting closer to more automation of radiology tasks than what we saw, in the first wave, right? I think looking back, what did we really get out of the first wave? We got a bunch of algorithms that can detect a bunch of condition chest X-rays and flag stroke on head CTs and a bunch of other, individual findings on a bunch of individual modalities, right? Nowhere close to holistic reporting you achieved, right? The closest you could say is a bunch of companies doing that on chest X-ray, right? Which is 2D image. The minute you get into 3D, like any kind of holistic reporting is way more tougher, way difficult, and some people are making some progress in head CTs, but like the number of modalities that exist and the number of findings is just, you're just dealing at a very, very large space, right? Just the mere task of annotating all that data and building models is just so challenging.
Yeah.
Right? But I think we are getting closer there because we now have transformers. We now have text that we can directly feed in. Right? Until earlier, you had to label all your data saying yes or no, or would draw boxes and all this annotation overhead. Like the way is a limiting factor because you have to formulate problems in a certain way. What changes now, because you have such great text models, is you have a paradigm where now you can give images and you have great text embeddings. Or text representations from the radiology notes that you can use to jointly train, which earlier also people were trying, but they were never as good. But now those models have gotten way better. I mean, in fact, now we've gotten to a stage where Elon Musk goes on Twitter and claims that you can feed PET CT scans to Grok and Grok will do And when people are, I mean, increasingly, Google also came out with the model that wants to claim medical general expertise,
Yeah,
right?
I think even Microsoft is working on a
Microsoft is
cancer
working
diagnosis
yeah,
model or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I think that construct of now you have multiple modalities. You have at least text and images, and you have text and images, and you can train them together. I think I think that paradigm is much stronger now. There's a lot more momentum in being able to do a better job of radiology automation, because you can cover a lot more findings and give better context on what findings you're looking for.
So if I can transition to the business case, right? So we spoke about deep learning has been going on for like 10 years now. We also spoke about how I made the assertion that why computer vision should have probably been solved by now because of so much data out there. At least there should be one company which has access to so much amount of data that they can probably train like multiple models on whatever context that they want, could probably assimilate all that. With that being said, if with that as context, I also feel like if you look at the companies that are being started in my assumption, to my limited knowledge as well, I don't think there are multiple healthcare companies that are being started. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Like, to the problems that you mentioned, right? I would assume that there are like, I don't know, 50 SaaS healthcare SaaS companies which are working on like very specific part of the problem or specific part of the pipeline, and they are providing solutions. That does not seem to be the case. Like, if you do a Google search on Indian healthcare deep learning companies, very few. So one is on that aspect. Why is that so? Maybe we can start from there and pick it up.
See, I think the great point, right? And one that I've looked out for answers for many years. The short answer is, making money in India for a health tech product is incredibly difficult, right? I mean, it boils down to what is the value you're delivering to the hospital. And if the answer is efficiency for the radiologist, like one common conversation that I've had to face with is, okay, so you're helping radiologists have longer tea breaks. I mean, these are salaried employees, you're making their life easier. What value is it to the hospital? So you can't just be improving efficiency of a radiologist and expect that you are delivering significant value from that. That's not the case, right? The only case where that's true is in this small or sub industry of radiology called teleradiology, where you send your scans out to someone who reads it remotely and reports it back. And teleradiology companies, there's one company called 5C, which is doing well. They help a lot of radiology centers across India report their radiology scans, X-ray, CTs, and so on. So people like that, leveraging AI is really helping them ensure quality and help their radiologists be more efficient, and that in turn has like a somewhat direct business use case for them.
But if I can push back, but why is it so? Like, in the sense that I would assume that even if it's a hospital, right? Like, if you're making their life easier by doing more radiology scans, isn't it helping their bottom line?
No, that's the point, right? So just because today the bottleneck of a radiology department from doing more scans is not because the radiologist is unable to handle the current load. Like, what determines how many scans the radiology department in a hospital can do is how many machines you have and how long you keep those machines running. Like, if you wanted to really just increase revenue, start nighttime services and open up your center through the night and have technicians run the place. Okay. You don't need doctors. You just need someone to operate the machine and take scans through the night, and there are centers that do that actually, right? I mean, so the easiest way to make more money is to take more scans, and the way to take more scans is to buy more machines or keep your machines running for longer. Like, making your report comes after a scan is taken. How soon can you deliver the reports, right? People have 1 day turnaround time. If you are super efficient in that, maybe you deliver that in 6 hours or 12 hours or 2 hours. But giving the report for the scan is not the limiting factor to why you're not taking more scans. Rather, just because you can deliver your reports for your radiology scans in an hour doesn't mean demand for radiology goes up, right? It's taking scans is very different from delivering reports on those scans. So just because you can make quicker reports doesn't increase business for you, doesn't increase revenue for you. Okay. The only way you can do that is if you can prove that AI somehow is increasing the quality of your reports by so much that physicians want patients to go to a specific center where they're using AI to generate reports because their reports are superior.
Sorry, to your earlier point, in a center may not be, like, let's say in Apollo, maybe they, like, for an Apollo it may not make sense, but at scale also you're saying it does not make sense. Let's say you're providing that service to the entire country, so there also it doesn't even out, is it?
No, the limiting factor to how many radiology scans India gets today is just number of machines that are out there. Okay. See, I think you could argue, okay, that look at areas like tuberculosis detection in public health, right? In these places, screening is not happening because one, X-ray machines don't exist, and two, even if X-ray machines existed, like, who'd read those X-rays? So there are companies like Cure who partner with X-ray companies and say, we have the detection algorithm, you take the device out to places that don't have access, and now we have a solution, right? But that is not, like, unless you partner with someone and go, like, make it happen for these use cases like public health screening, there is no other organic push that just because you have some kind of automation in reporting or efficiency in reporting, that suddenly demand or accessibility to these services increases. Like, it's, what I'm saying is, because efficiency increases, there's only indirectly that access to screening increases, right? Access to these imaging services increase, because truly, like, it's still the cost and access to these machines that is also in a big way what is limiting.
I mean, somebody looking from the outside with all the all the tech the tech advancement that have happened, right, would assume that this is a gold mine, right? Like, I mean, like, across all modalities there is so much opportunity, but the business case hasn't really panned out.
I think looking at healthcare with the lens of radiology alone and thinking I'm going to make a dent in just radiology and helping radiologists become faster, I think is very reduction stuff. See, radiology is one part of the care, right? I mean, just like whatever scan is being taken in the context of a patient journey that when you talk about radiology is completely lost, right? When you say screening, okay, that's one large use case that could exist if you partner with X-rays and do public health screening and so on, or you have some other cancer screening, you have these specific use cases. But for instance, you take any modality like a head CT or a chest CT, or you have so many different reasons why you take those scans, right? And if you just look at radiology AI as this one piece where you're going to solve and make an impact, I feel like you're missing the picture, right? Your entire picture. Like, you say you're trying to solve cancer, or you're trying to solve some issue or disease or management of some cardiology or some chronic condition, and radiology is one piece of that, then you're talking about something that can deliver value, which if you look at companies that have gotten reimbursement codes in the US, right? So there's a company called Viz.ai that was one of the earlier guys who did well commercially in the radiology AI space. What they went out and proved is, for this specific stroke condition, there is a approved procedure that you could use that could save the patient, right? So you had this stroke called large vessel occlusion, and you had this specific TPA procedure that you did. If you did to the patient, then the patient would survive, and you have significantly better morbidity, mortality results. And so what they basically built was not just an algorithm that any patient gets a CT angiogram, they would detect it, but it had like an entire platform that would convey that message immediately without waiting for a radiologist to review it. It would convey that message directly to the interventional neurology team, so that they can be prepare the operating theater and have the entire nursing team and the entire care team, so that the patient can be wheeled in and they reduce time in how soon the patient can go under the table and get treated. So there you're solving you're not just saying, oh, I'm helping detect stroke. You've detected a particular stroke and you're notifying the team. You're detecting a particular kind of stroke that can be treated with a particular kind of therapy, and you are notifying the team that can actually act on that information and making sure that they get ready to treat that patient.
It's a full-fledged solution.
It's a full care continuum, right? So unless you have unless you can look at that entire care pathway and say radiology is one piece of it, but what is that entire continuum that I can piece together and deliver value and prove that the patient, prove that ultimately, ultimately in developed countries at least, right? One way to think about it is, if the patient is covered by insurance, if you can do something that reduces mortality or reduces hospitalization, gives better outcome to the patient, you could technically assign value in dollar amount. So if you can take that for diseases or for particular conditions that you detect on any kind of imaging or any kind of modality for that matter, and prove that you are doing something that can reduce morbidity, mortality, improve outcomes, then that is proven value. But if you look at being able to look at and detect findings, which otherwise would have been found, but you're just making it faster, you're just making it better, it's difficult to prove that you have improved patient outcomes.
On the full-fledged solution part, I feel it also becomes very difficult for an outsider going in, like just with the tech knowledge, right? Let's say you've seen some paper on archive and now you're like, fuck, let me just build a tech solution here. Very, very naive way to go about it. I think it'll be difficult for people who don't have this background or who are not in the space. Is it fair to say that it's going to be slightly difficult, obviously, but...
I think anyone delving into healthcare, I think you need to understand the entire... you need to have a holistic picture of what goes on in the hospital. If you just stick with, I'm looking into this one modality, I'm going to make a bunch of different diagnoses, build some cool machine learning models to predict this and that, I think the point is lost, right? You need to really understand what is the actionable that you are driving, how does it impact patient, how does it fit into the workflow and still deliver that impact and that value for the patient. So you need to understand the entire care pathway, right? And without that, I think it is difficult, right? And I think, at least that is what I think a lot of first generation radiology AI companies, including many of us, I think missed. Is just think of radiology AI as this, radiology AI as this magic bullet, but all you're actually solving is just make interpretation of one modality or one kind of imaging better without taking into context the entire disease state, patient journey, or care pathway that you're actually a part of, and extend into that journey, right?
Could you also, because I'm interested in knowing the difficulties of, let's say, building a company, because you have exposure to building a company in India, and also now you have also exposure in, let's say, visiting the US multiple times and having an active engagement there. Like, can you maybe lay out the differences between, let's say, starting a healthcare company in India, maybe solving the same problem, but what kind of challenges might be there in India versus, let's say, the US, or any picture that you could paint there?
Yeah. There's a lot of differences, lot of differences. Fundamentally, care is different, right? The standard of care is very different. Standard of care is very different in the sense the kinds of treatment options or the standard or the usual treatments that you will provide to a patient with XYZ diagnosis is different between US and India, right? Ultimately, you say, oh, it's medicine. But you take an example of, atrial fibrillation, which is like a common health condition, which is a common heart condition. In India, if you have AFib, detected on ECG, you will say the biggest risk of having AFib is that you have higher chances of developing stroke. In India, what you do is you take that patient, you give them blood thinners, and you put them on. You give them a medicine that basically reduces your chances of developing a stroke because it thins your blood. It has other issues in that it can actually cause, if your blood is thin, so if you do end up in some kind of trauma, you might bleed a lot. So there are associated risks. But the same kind of patient if you have AFib in the US, like, you might put in a device inside your heart that reduces your chances of risk. It's a surgical procedure. It's a minimally invasive surgical procedure. You might go inside your heart and ablate the left atrium to reduce chances.
They are not taking any chances.
They are not taking any chances, right? But these procedures are damn expensive. They're not cheap at all, right? In India, like, you do those kinds of procedures not for more complicated heart conditions. You go inside the heart and you solve it. Like in India, like you don't. So lot of opportunities, like a lot of opportunities that exist in the US don't exist in India because the cost is prohibitively high. The expertise, there is a lot of capital expenditure needed to have that kind of setup going, and the ongoing cost of delivering that treatment, delivering that procedure is also high, and the payment models in India just don't support it. Right? These kinds of procedures will cost $50,000. They're not cheap, and India, nobody's going to pay out of pocket for something like that.
Which means there is an opportunity for companies to be started in maybe.
So because the standard of care itself is so different, and how you're delivering, there are opportunities. So you're looking at, first you're starting off only at a larger gamut of therapies and treatment opportunities, and then you are working at one level below, saying, how can I optimize any of these procedures? And these procedures are, again, like the magnitude of the sum of money involved in each of these procedures is also much higher, again, when you compare for an equivalent procedure in India.
If at all,
exactly. If at all, right? So fundamentally the problems are very different. The problems that so I'm not saying India is bad, right? I'm not saying India delivers bad healthcare. What I'm saying is the way you need to think about Indian healthcare is very different, or the problems you solve in Indian healthcare are very different from US healthcare. Like in India, you're trying to engineer for value. You're trying to say, okay, so if you look at the same problem, you look at it and you say, those devices that exist to treat these conditions that you would do in the US are way too expensive for India. How can I build technology that can reduce that cost, or how can I come up with an innovative business model that can increase accessibility to that procedure by stacking 10 patients each day, or like figuring out ways to add volume and drive a business model that works. So you need to do more value engineering, and it's very different how you think about it versus how you would think about solving that problem, what you would try to do to solve that problem in the US.
Would you also say it's fair that for somebody starting a company today in India, is it better to just focus on the US market rather than Indian market?
I don't think there is it really depends on what is better, right? What is your goal from starting the company?
If it's making money.
Even then, I don't think it's necessarily, see, let me put it this way, right? How much money are you starting with?
Okay.
How much money are you starting with the end goal of making money, right? Because entering the US market and building products for all these is also not cheap, right? US is equally more expensive for anything and everything that you do, right? Like and you cannot enter the market without an FDA approval. You have to spend a lot of money on clinical trials. So the entire process of building devices and is also building medical technology is also equally much more expensive to do it in the US, or even to take to the US market. The kind of problems you have to solve in India are very different. The point is, if you want to do something in India, you have to think about it very differently than you would in the US. And ultimately, if I'm being very, very brutally honest about it, India is tough. You need to have a different character, a different DNA to tackle the Indian beast. Then naturally there is a lot more value placed on IP and IP-led innovation
in the US.
Right? Because the medical device industry in the US itself is so large that each of those companies are huge by themselves, and they're all competing to work with the best. So there is naturally a lot more value that gets placed on good IP and good technology than you'd see in the US, than you'd see in India. India does not have large medical device companies. We don't have a big daddy in medical devices, right? All the big ones that have big offices in India are subsidiaries of US companies.
Philips and all that.
Philips, GE, Siemens, that kind of people, right? And they are not doling out, and they are not necessarily leading huge innovations by partnering with local companies or or doing any. If you look at other medical device companies, like medical devices like implants and that kind of medical devices, like we have hardly anyone.
You're talking about cochlear implants?
Look, any kinds of heart implants, cochlear implants, valves, all that, knee surgeries, like orthopedic implants, all kinds of implants, like or even diagnostic devices. Yeah, diagnostic devices, GE, Philips, Siemens, but yeah, see, all the others you still have. You have some few companies here and there. I mean, India's still working to build its first indigenous MRI machine. Right? I mean, like there is gap to be solved. Like, I mean, huge gap to be solved. So without that, and I mean, obviously, we should figure out a way to get there. But having those big guys makes it easier for medical device innovation. There's more, like, if you had to start a large company, let's say I'm crazy good at artificial intelligence for CT imaging, right? And the big daddies in CT is Philips, Siemens, and GE. If I was crazy good and I had a locally grown company that was a huge player in CT, like it is not far-fetched to think, that I'd invest in this startup, because my exit opportunity is also someone that is not more than a few connections away. Right? But in India, that connection is not easy to draw, right? Because, like, if you start a very large CT technology company, the acquisitions that GE and Siemens and Philips are making are sitting in their headquarters somewhere else, right? When will they ever take note of a company in India saying, oh, this guy is claiming he's the best in the world? They'll be like, what, is this company real? Like, do they really have an office? Like, they don't know India, right? I mean, so so I think just having a medical device, like, lack of giants does impact innovation in the space. So I think if we had more giants here, I think it would become more naturally clear what that might be more momentum for innovation.
Any other thing that come to mind, like in terms of differences, or are those like the big?
Yeah, I mean, insurance. There's so many things. Payment, right? Payment, just payment. Very heavily payment. Like, insurance heavily covers like all of the population in the US, and insurance dollars are they're large in dollars, and you compare that with also PPP and like Forex. It's, if you convert how much people are getting or how much insurance is paying for people's treatments in the US, it's a very large number, right? Agreed, we all know that number is way too high for the US, right? But ultimately, like, it is very high. So even if you can make a fraction of that money, it's a lot of money. And the way you get payment is also very different, right? You have to go through. So if you want to get paid for your procedure, you have to build evidence, you have to show it improves outcomes, you have to get something called a CPT code, and you get reimbursed for it. Hospitals can get your test, the payment for your test, reimbursed by their insurer. So an entire process around it, about how you get paid for your tests and insurance. In India, like, I don't think that exists. Ecosystem even exists. How do you take an innovative product to get reimbursed by insurance? I think, like, is still very in early days.
Sorry, maybe a digression here, but what about Western Europe? Like, I mean, is generally, like, does US dominate the whole, like, sector, like most industries, or is there any?
US is huge, right? US is huge in all of these, in the healthcare market at least. The other markets are not. The other markets are somewhat big.
Like, nobody says we're building for Netherlands, or like I'm going to focus on Germany. Like, never happens.
There is local innovation if you think about it. Like, if you think about it, there are German companies, or there are Spanish companies, Dutch companies that are building for the European market, and then they say okay, and then they scale to the US market. And Europe also does a lot to encourage whatever local innovation and collaboration and all of that.
And regulation.
Yeah, they have their own CE mark and data. They have the very different data privacy, all that. Yeah, they do all that stuff. The market there is also, Europe is actually very fragmented. Like, every country has their own different ways of insurance, how they deal with insurance, how they deal with regulation. Okay, regulation is somewhat standard with the CE mark, but how you approach hospitals, and are hospital systems privatized? Is insurance privatized? Is insurance nationalized? All of that is different for each country. Like, the NHS, selling to NHS is very different from selling to the Dutch system or the German system. So
US meets is like 330 million, population, huge population, rich population. Ticks all the boxes there.
Yeah. So if you are solving for India, again, like I said, the problems are different. You have to think about, in India, I think in India, I think it's tough to sustain if you are purely a tech play. In India, you have to think about how can I deliver tech-enabled services that are differentiated from the rest. You take any vertical, like you take primary care, you take gynecology, you take anything, right? Cardiology. How can I deliver some experience that is far differentiated, that is tech-enabled, that delivers excellent patient experience and outcomes, if you can, than anyone else out there. If you can do that as a service, then there is maybe a business to be made, right? Or like what people are doing with AI powered teleradiology, like that, there's a business to be made there, because it makes sense, right? Because what you need is not just putting a dollar or putting a rupee value on technology and selling that to hospitals and diagnostic, incredibly difficult. Because India is a country, like, paying for software is, we want everything free, right? We want everything free. We want everything bundled into something else, and especially when the value isn't clear, right? IT budgets are like, they're always squeezed out.
Sometimes even when the value is clear, also they're like,
can you value clear? I mean,
free mein kar do yaar.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows how valuable Excel is, so how many people are paying for Excel? Yeah.
Two things, right? So one thing that I'm getting a sense of is, like, I'm feeling like the most of the customers are either hospitals. Can you shed light on, like, you mentioned teleradiology as well, but I'm guessing most of the like, if anybody's starting focusing on hospitals, maybe, is that true? But that is one thing. Second, also, is there a B2C play here? Like, is there a lot of money to be made in B2C? Or like, one thing after ChatGPT, what I've noticed is, like, we'll diagnose it for you, like you chat your symptoms and all that, and we'll tell you what the probable diagnosis is. Is that the thing that comes to my mind? Are there, like, more B2C plays here, or is it mostly, it's better to just focus on B2B? And who are the customers in B2B?
I think there are potentially B2C plays, or there could be B2B2C plays. I mean, what I mean is, ultimately you do have to think about the patient, because again, very different from US markets or other insurance driven markets, is the payer in India is most predominantly the patient.
Yeah.
Right? They might have insurance that, and there is a wave of all of health insurance and health assurance that are coming up. But predominantly the decision maker is very much the patient. So whatever technology you build, you need to be able to, if you are able to communicate to the patient the value of what you are doing, then those patients will go seek out providers who offer that kind of care, right? So, and that might not be, I mean, obviously there are hospitals that are trying to, I've seen, recently I was in Chennai and I saw buses, Chennai state buses, which had which were running the advertisement of some hospital, and they said AI powered CT scan. I felt wow. I mean, 5 years later, I thought, wow, people are actually, I mean, where was this 5 years ago? Why weren't people buying radiology AI at the time, thinking they could plaster this? This is what you wanted people to plaster on their hospital if they bought us. But okay, at least 5 years later, it's happening. But as a external person looking at that ad, I was still lost. Okay, what does AI powered CT scan even mean? Like, why is it good for me? Like, what are you trying to say that, okay, just because it's AI powered CT scan, does that mean the CT will be better? Will my report be better? Like, are you telling me that, it's just not clear what you're trying to communicate to patients just because you say AI powered. But so beyond technology, if you're able to articulate to the patient why exactly they should come to you, because this center is powered by XYZ technology, then I think it does. I think patients are very aware today. They are reading up. By the time they go to a doctor, they've Googled all their symptoms, they know what they're looking at. So if you can pop up on that research somehow and get their attention, I think there is a market to be, there is money to be made. At least there is demand to be tapped into. I mean, whether money to be made depends on whether we can fulfill that demand, but there is definitely demand because patients are looking out. And India is generally, like, at least the cities and a lot of the literate population is definitely looking up everything before they.
And generally that's the market you want to tap on. I mean, the poor people are not going to pay for that.
Poor people are. Yeah, that's a whole different, that's a whole different animal to solve, right? I mean, what are you solving for them? What are you trying to solve for them is, like, Yeah, that's the whole India versus Bharat, and how we can solve for Bharat is like,
Yeah, like the free cash flow you generate from metro cities, you got to pump that in like on these tier 2 cities or tier 3 cities. Yeah, anyways, yeah. And on the, like, are the hospitals, like, in terms of B2B, like, is majorly hospitals are the biggest customers for these plays, or is there?
again, depends on what you're building, right? I mean, if you're building AI in radiology, then then your customer in some sense is a diagnostic center, a lab, or a hospital. But depends on what you're building. I mean, I think there are opportunities to go on an app, mobile app, and go directly to customer and become some kind of a bridge to enable communication between doctors and patients, and there are startups doing that. What do you solve with AI and all of that is, I think, not so clear, but
Trust is the biggest factor, I think, no? Like whenever you go to an institution, you kind of like...
yeah, you meet and see the doctor, and that adds a lot of credibility. And I mean, and you finally, a lot of healthcare is
Trust.
I mean, it's trust. And finally, you if you have a fever, you're down at home with a cough, you probably know that if you just wait it out and have some paracetamol, you're gonna be fine in a few days. But by the third day, you still want to go see a doctor, and the doctor is basically just writing Dolo and sending you home. But just because you wanted someone to say you'll be fine, you go see the doctor, you pay $1,000. Right?
Correct.
I think that is healthcare. And so, so what do you solve with AI still remains an open question, right? So your customer, is it a hospital or is it directly to consumer, really depends on what you're trying to build and how you're solving anything for the patient. Which is what I think, and coming back to what do you solve for patients in India, I think that's and a lot of that problem, I think, is still accessibility. If you look at Bharat, and like, how can you increase accessibility to good quality care across cities, across various regions?
Going back to your Chennai bus story, right? I don't know. Do you feel like you started too early? Do you feel like you were too early in the space? Like, I mean, is that? Do you ever feel that?
I don't think we are too early for the space, but maybe we should have thought harder about the markets and the problems we're going after. Or rather, I think we ended up choosing problems that were very relevant for the kind of care that was delivered in the US or developed markets in general, and trying to sell that in India. Right? If I started today and said I want to focus on India, then maybe I would have straight up gone towards chest x-rays, right? I mean, or like chest x-rays, because that is like the starting modality that can be made most accessible. And so if I can try to make AI more accessible, then maybe if I was so focused on India, maybe I should start with chest x-rays. And I think that, obviously started as a starry-eyed, naive,
Like everybody else.
like everybody else. So made a bunch of mistakes along the way on how you could have gone about selecting what problems to go after.
You've done pretty well, Suthirth. Let's cut the crap. Just what advice would you give for anyone looking, like, let's say, looking to start something in healthcare? What would you tell them?
Spend a lot of time in hospitals or in wherever you want your product to be used or seen. So just don't just assume whatever. Don't solve a chest X-ray by downloading a dataset from Kaggle and then working on it and thinking that is your startup. Go out and sit in radiology labs and see what kinds of and just talk to the patient, see why they're in, see what they're in. So I think understanding of what that doctor goes through, what that patient goes through, and ensuring that you have the right problem is, I think, critical. And if you understood very clearly what is the problem you're going after, I think there is potentially value to be made. But also think about, I think the challenge continues to be understanding who your customer is and how much you're going to get you can charge from your customer. The challenge in India is, one is figuring out a product that can deliver value, and two is always distribution. Because if you end up coming up with, which in often cases in India you will come up with, is, I found a way to build something cheaper than what exists today. The minute you say, my value proposition is that I'm going to be cheaper, the only way you make money is if you have immense volume, right? Because your starting value proposition is that you're You are going to cut costs, cut prices, and that's how you're going to make money. So in which case, if you want to make a lot of money, you need to have a lot of distribution. You need to be out there. So that becomes difficult because the distribution in India is not easy, right? I mean, selling to so many centers and selling to doctors and hospitals takes time. They don't get convinced easily. They want to see a lot of evidence. They want to see a lot of proof points before they actually start using it and testing it on their patients. So distribution is tough. Distribution is tough and slow. So it's a long game, and you need to make sure. So if you can figure out a way that you do something better than everyone else, and you can get a lot of money for it, then you don't have to worry so much about distribution. So I think it's building in healthcare and commercializing and getting a product to all of India has challenges that you need to think through from day one. If you're starting, basically it's not just value, but think about how you're going to get it out and how you get it in the hands of and how much you actually get paid for it.
So in 2025, I feel agents and reasoning models are two things which are like at peak hype, I think. Are there use cases that you are seeing in healthcare which make use of, let's say, LLMs, tool calls, agents, and also the impact of reasoning models? Are there things that were not probably not possible, let's say, with models like GPT-4o or Gemini 1.5, whatever? Are there things that are possible now that you are seeing which were not possible just 6 months back or a year back?
Definitely.
Could you speak to that? Like, what is the impact and how have things changed, and what you also expect in the future to be?
So fundamentally, like I said, right, the earlier paradigm of deep learning, for instance, assumed you had to formulate your problems in a certain way, right? You had to take these images and you had to say, condition 1, yes, no. Condition 2, yes, no. Condition 3, this is the box where it is. Like, there's a certain way in which you could solve problems, and unless you get all your data curated like that is. Now, because you have text understanding at a whole new level, and you have this entire concept of reasoning, like with all these DeepSeek kind of models, you are now looking at a paradigm where you could train, if you had, I think the key here is data. If you have massive amounts of multimodal data, right? You look at, I have CT scans, I have the reports, I also know what happened to the patient before that, after that. I have that patient's ECG. You have all of this data. You could imagine a paradigm where you could have AI agents that are able to read, certain radiology images, ECGs or CT scans with that context of the patient, and then give you a contextually correct report or analysis or even some kind of risk prediction. I think a lot of the data that exists in the healthcare system is obviously notes, and until today we've not been able to tap the full extent of the knowledge that is saved in those notes.
Patient notes, you're talking about.
Patient notes, which are
reports and all that.
Reports and clinician written notes, and that differs widely across geographies. In India, you have discharge summaries and radiology reports, and some part of it is digitized. But in the US, you have incredibly detailed reports of what symptoms they came in, what they talked about, and all those incredibly detailed notes. Yeah, so you have all that entire context available to you that you can use to set context for models. So if I'm reading a chest X-ray, if I have an agent that's reporting a chest X-ray, I can go through all the patient's previous records, know what all the patient had. I already know that I'm going to expect to see a pacemaker on that patient's chest X-ray because I've seen from the notes the patient has a pacemaker. And I'll just, I won't be surprised when I see one or be confused that I don't know what this bright thing is on the image, because you already have that context. So obviously you're expecting to see a pacemaker. In fact, now that I know that I have a pacemaker, maybe I can report if the leads have moved around and have gone places they're not supposed to. So you can have another pacemaker agent checking if the leads are placed correctly. So the potential of what you could, because you have the context now built in, the potential of what you could do is immense, right? And agentic fundamentally means that I can have one AI model I can have multiple AI models that are each tuned to do a different thing. So I have a screening agent, I have an agent that looks at post-operative care, I have another agent that looks at pre-surgical planning, like you have someone else that is another AI agent that is just monitoring chronic conditions. Like, you can have so many different agents that all consume different kinds of data, but and each try to achieve a different kind of objective. I mean, right now the space is all like very, very, very early in thinking on what kinds of problems you can solve and go after. Like very simply, like there are companies or teams that are working on just being able to look at all your patient notes and be able to answer large language model questions, which is, I think, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg, right, with what you can do. So we've got into a paradigm where people are plugging in large language models to patient notes. So that, and the simplest thing that will solve for you is when the patient walks in, instead of the physician having to read all the patient's previous notes, you ask the patient, give me a summary, and then give me a summary relevant to cardiology, or give me a summary relevant to diabetes care, whatever, and then these large language models will be able to give you a good answer, right? And I'm saying good answer especially because you have reasoning today, right? So earlier, again, like at least the first generation of ChatGPT, you could ask it a question like, does this patient have a cardiac condition? And unless the answer really had like something that was directly, explicitly talked about cardiology or heart, it probably wouldn't recognize. But now these reasoning models like surpass that to a whole different level, and they'll even give you things that are remotely related to, say, cardiology.
And we are in the very early days of reasoning
models. They're very
early
days of reasoning models, yeah. Right? And
not even 1 year.
Yeah, and we are like and agentic AI is still like a concept, especially in healthcare, right? You have agentic models that people are building to build presentations, to build slides, to do data analysis, to do pandas, and like, so I think, yeah, we are in the
AlexNet era of agents.
Yeah, we're in the AlexNet era of and healthcare is slow, right? I mean, so it's going to take a while before you have, especially like you have these models like plug into like daily care. And
has selling become easier after ChatGPT?
I think so, yes. I mean, I think depends on who your audience is, but I certainly think it's certainly opened up people's imaginations to AI, right? Until, like, if I went to a doctor 5 years ago, I mean, and I've had multiple doctors who've said, what are you even trying to do? Like, people have been trying to do this for ages. You walk in here one fine day and say you're going to solve who you think you're Mark Zuckerberg, right? Literally words that been told, right? So I think that mentality is gone, right? You walk in and say, oh, you're working in AI. They're like, I mean,
touching your feet and all.
No, they're not touching your feet, but they don't think of you as crazy, right? Whether you're the man to do it, I think that depends on credibility and what you say. But someone walking into a doctor's office saying you're going to build AI that can do X to Y, it's not. They don't say it's not possible. They're only questioning, can you do it, right? They're not like, if you say you're from OpenAI and you're trying to do this, they're definitely touching your feet, right? Right. So at some level, they do think that there are people out there that whereas 5 years back you said, oh, I'm going to read a cardiac CT or like some chest CT fully automatically, people would say, what are you doing? What do you know how complex this stuff is? Right? But today they've themselves experienced that they click a photo of anything and everything, and it is able to understand everything on that image. So how far-fetched is it for anyone who's done that or used that to conceive that that you could click CTs or X-rays and be able to read it? I think definitely like a consumer product that's shown that capability is definitely made
things a lot more
easier for people to understand what you're doing.
And I think it's made like working in AI also pretty sexy, right? Like, I mean, AI pre-ChatGPT also was pretty much hot. But like post-ChatGPT, it's just gone.
Yeah. Like, I almost felt that pre-ChatGPT, like about 2019, right? I almost felt like we're downward. We're going, like, there was a lot of hype. That hype has really sobered down.
Okay.
We've gone down to a place where you have these oddly specific tasks that AI is good at doing, but it's nowhere at the hype that you thought AI would deliver, right? And then ChatGPT came, and suddenly the space like became hot again. Right? Until then, and so now I remember people, like I've had people say when I say, oh, I'm working on AI, like, and I tell them I've been working since 2015. They're like, oh, you are from the OG AI era. Like, I'm like, that was really what what is the start of AI? But now people are like, oh, people are getting in now into AI, because now is when really it came into the forefront of, like, until 2015, like, people knew things were happening in AI, but it was very easy. You didn't have to be living. I mean, a lot of people still didn't know that AI was happening, and people still considered AI to be this cool, a little bit fictitious thing that may or may not work, right? I think.
Ironically, honestly, I thought I was late when I thought even in 2018, I thought I was very late. You know what I'm saying? Even though people are getting into like 23, like post ChatGPT and all that. But honestly, when I got into it, I thought I was very late. Like, it's too late now, because AlexNet had happened in 2012, right? So I was like, it's already been 6 years. Like, is there anything to be done now? Like,
Yeah. I think I agree, right? I think 2018, 2019, I mean, I think the first few years of one big, or after a blip, right? After one monumental paper like AlexNet and like GPT, I think there's a rapid succession of a lot of things that just keep pushing it, and you're just not able to stay on top. I think we are now at that stage with all this LLMs and
Correct.
DeepSeek and still that continues to go on, but it's, I mean, maybe pace reduced or stabilized a little bit, but it's still like, I mean, it's still a lot, right? I'm seeing that new normal of how fast things come out is still very, very rapid.
Yeah, honestly, now that you mention it, right, like taking the cutoff as 2012, like the innovation or the pace at which papers were being released and were breaking the ImageNet, top 5 accuracy was crazy, right? AlexNet, then VGGNet, then Inception V2, then ResNet. Every year there was like something, and segmentation was improving. Like all you had to do was wait in the office for 6 months till you, like 6 months later, you would have a better segmentation model and a computationally, MB wise also it'll be like lower. So all you had to do was just sit in the office and wait, right? Crazy.
And today you sit back and think of all the problems you were trying to solve in 2015, and you're like, those are all just function calls on some standard library. It's just like
I was looking at AI, Google's AI Studio, and these detection models that we had to train with so much data, and they're like, upload the photo, we'll give you the boxes. What? You can't do this. This is not fair. So, is that like on the talent side? Like, are you finding that, because we spoke, there are so many people entering the market as well, right? Like, do you feel that there is a talent problem at all, or
there is? I don't think much has changed in terms of. See, I think there's a lot more awareness, a lot more people who want to get into AI, and I think from that point of view, there's definitely a lot more people out there who already know things in AI or neural networks than what existed many years ago. Like many years ago, you had to be super targeted to find talent who had actually done work in neural networks. Today, I think just that hype of just the hype around AI is just lent itself to a lot of people just naturally themselves learning what neural networks are and wanting a job in data science space. But the quality of talent is still a entire curve, right, of people who aren't down to really the basics. I think Cursor and those and ChatGPT has made it incredibly easy for anyone to write on their resume that they've trained XYZ model to do something with neural networks. And so just seeing candidates who on resume look like they've actually done very impressive stuff, and then you go talk to them and try to understand what exactly they've done, and sometimes you are. So I think, but all on the other side, there are still like this. I think we also have incredibly good talent. It's just that the total number of people who have this talent has gone up, and so you're now starting to see more people on both ends of the spectrum. So, but we also have incredibly good people who are really up to date and in touch with all of everything that's happening in the world of LLMs and in the world of transformers and in the world of neural networks in general. And I think we are also starting to see a lot more experts, who are experts in NLPs, who are expert in images, who are expert in specific kinds of images, signals, and plugged into the AI models and worlds of those specific areas, I think.
I mean, in any gold rush, I feel there will be people who would want to take part, many people see all the funding that's been pouring into AI companies, and they're like, even I want a slice of that. So I think
it's real value, right? I think a large part of AI is become software as usual, right? Right. It's recommender systems and things like that. You expect good consumer products to just have that today. So it's not like this, oh, I'm so futuristic, I'm so visionary, so I'm going to have an AI team and experiment with stuff. It's a lot of AI has become
standard
software that and standard and expected from products that that the demand exists, or the demand exists for that kind of talent, and people have teams that are needed to deliver the kinds of experiences that users expect, which you can't deliver if you don't have AI built into your products. So I think that's definitely evolved.
Before we close, wanted to get your prediction on how do you think the space will evolve in the next 5 years? Because people are claiming that if you were to give any weight to Sam's or Dario's words, I think both of them are claiming maybe in 27 we might have AGI or any stuff like that. But anyways, what would be your prediction in terms of like how the space would evolve in the next 5 years? If you have. What would you expect?
5 years is a long time, but I think AI is already very rapidly. I mean, you have a lot of general purpose AI today. I think general purpose AI will maybe get better to some extent, but I think what you'll really start emerging is like, at least that's what I'm drawn towards or excited with, is like more domain specific AI, right? You have AI today that works on a bunch of like general purpose things today. Right, but you don't have enough specialized AI models or agents that can actually help you with a lot of things that you otherwise do day-to-day life, right? And you're starting to see it, right? Coding is the first thing that's really put a dent on, and that makes sense, right? For given the amount of resources and codes, etc. available. But I think making presentations, making art, comic books, I mean illustrations. All that kind of things, I think you will and increasingly like domains specific to industries, healthcare, life sciences, automotive, whatever it is. I think all of those industries, I think you'll have more relevant AI that really pops up, and I think you can't deny that AI increases productivity. And there's just this massive opportunity to build AI for literally everything, right? I think and it's very tough to today say that there is any industry that will not benefit at all, right? As long as anyone's doing anything on a laptop or is doing anything digitally, and even maybe transcending digital soon.
Right? Robotics is eating into that slowly.
That those things will take longer, but like digital productivity, I think is definitely changing, right? And in today's day and age, like there is no industry that is not that is not doing a lot of things digitally. So all of that, I think, the next 5 years, I think you'll have a lot more agents or helping you being way more productive in a lot of these things. AGI and all of that superhuman things, I'm a little skeptical, but I'm happy to. I'm not so old, right? I mean, I'm not so old. I don't know what it looks like. It's good if it happens, right? But I'll be surprised, right? I mean, 5 years you can never say what happens. So
5 years is a long time.
And what is AGI really? I think is what can it answer? What can it do? Is all. Maybe the way it pans out is very different from one supernatural being, but is completely something else.
We'll find out in 5 years.
We'll find out.
I think on that note, Suthirth, thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday evening. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks then for coming all the way and doing this. It's been a long time.
Thank you, Suthirth.
Thanks.